If you ask anyone to picture ancient engineering, they will almost always picture this: the Roman aqueduct. It is the ultimate symbol of civilization, massive, dominating, built to last forever. History books tell us that Rome brought fresh water to the world, mastering hydraulic engineering in a way no one else could match. But there is a problem with that story. Because while the imperial network of Rome lies in ruins, largely dry and broken for 1,500 years, another system, built 5 centuries before Rome, is still flowing today. It has no pumps, it uses no electricity, and it has required zero budget from an imperial treasury to keep it running for 3,000 years. Everyone knows the Romans were the master builders of the ancient world. They're wrong. This is no history. And today, we are digging deep to find the truth about the invisible empire that outlived Rome. To understand why we got this wrong, we first have to give credit where it is due. I grew up believing the Roman aqueduct was the pinnacle of human achievement, and honestly, the numbers back that up. Between 312 BCE and 226 CE, Rome constructed 11 major aqueduct systems to feed the capital alone. The longest of these, the Aqua Marcia, stretched for 91 kilometers. That is roughly the distance from London to Oxford, built entirely by gravity. The engineering commissioner of Rome, a man named Sextus Julius Frontinus, kept meticulous records. He tells us that at its peak, this system delivered 1 million cubic meters of water into the city every single day. That is enough to supply 1 million people with more water per capita than the average resident of New York City gets today. It allowed Rome to have 900 public baths, 1,200 fountains, and a level of sanitation the world wouldn't see again until the Victorian era. And the precision required to do this was staggering. To keep water flowing without pumps, Roman engineers had to maintain a consistent gradient. Too steep, and the rushing water would erode the stone and destroy the channel. Too shallow, and the water would stagnate, becoming a breeding ground for disease. They hit a gradient of roughly 1 meter drop for every kilometer of length. That is an accuracy of 0.1%. When you look at the Pont du Gard, standing 49 meters tall, holding up tons of flowing water, it is easy to see why we think this was the peak. It feels permanent. It feels invincible. But there was a fatal flaw in the Roman design, one that would leave their cities dry and their people thirsty the moment the empire began to crack. While Rome was still a collection of mud huts on a hill, engineers in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran, had already solved the water problem. But they didn't build up, they dug down. 500 years before the first Roman aqueduct, the Persians developed the qanat. And this poses a serious problem for the traditional history of technology. Because if Roman engineering was so superior, why is it that once the empire crumbled, the great stone arteries of the West went dry? Yet the qanats of Persia, built 3,000 years ago, are still flowing today. I want you to really process that timeline. The Gonabad Qanat in Iran was built around 700 BCE. It has provided water continuously for 27 centuries. It survived the invasion of Alexander the Great. It survived the Mongols. It survived the rise and fall of the caliphates. And it is surviving the modern climate crisis. How is it possible that a primitive system of tunnels outlasted the greatest engineering marvels of the classical world? The answer lies in a feat of engineering so precise it makes the Roman aqueducts look clumsy by comparison. To understand the genius of the qanat, we have to look at how it works. A Roman aqueduct is primarily a transport system. It captures a specific spring or river and carries it to the city. A qanat is an extraction system. It hunts for water where none exists on the surface, boring horizontally into the water table itself. The process began with a mother well, dug by hand, sometimes reaching 100 meters deep, the height of a 30-story building. Once they found the aquifer, the real work began. They had to dig a tunnel from the settlement back to that mother well, often for tens of kilometers. And here is where the engineering becomes mind-bending. Just like the Romans, they needed a slope. Now, the Romans did build tunnels, but they often had the luxury of surface surveys or cut-and-cover trenches. The Persian builders, known as muqannis, were working entirely blind, 50 meters underground in pitch darkness, with barely enough air to breathe. They had to maintain a slope of 1 to 1,000. That means for every 1,000 meters they dug horizontally, the tunnel could only drop 1 single meter. If they dug too steep, the water would rush too fast and collapse the tunnel walls, burying them alive. If they dug too flat, the water wouldn't flow at all. And they did this without laser levels, without GPS, and without modern surveying equipment. They used oil lamps to sight straight lines in the dark. They used the flame of the lamp to test for oxygen. If the flame turned blue or died, they knew they had seconds to escape before suffocating. It was incredibly dangerous work. It was said that a muqanni would say a prayer for the dead every morning before descending the shaft, because he never knew if he would come back up. But the result was an engineering marvel that dwarfs the Roman system in scale. In Iran alone, there are an estimated 50,000 qanats. If you linked all their tunnels end to end, they would stretch for 270,000 kilometers. That is nearly the distance to the moon. It is enough to wrap around the Earth's equator 7 times. While Rome was building monuments, Persia was building a subterranean circulatory system for the entire planet. And this design had massive advantages over the Roman approach. First, efficiency. Roman aqueducts were engineering triumphs, but in the open air, they lost massive amounts of water to evaporation and illegal tapping. The qanat is entirely underground. It minimizes evaporation to almost zero, protects the water from contamination, and secures it from theft, delivering every drop exactly where it is needed. Second, gravity. Roman aqueducts often required massive bridges to cross valleys, expensive, fragile targets for enemies. Qanats rely on pure, uninterrupted gravity. They don't try to bridge the sky, they tunnel through the earth. If a mountain is in the way, they go under it. There are no exposed arches to destroy. But the biggest advantage was political. Roman aqueducts were state projects. They required the emperor's treasury and the legion's protection. When the empire fell, the expertise vanished. The budget vanished. The aqueducts broke, and no one knew how to fix them. Qanats were local. They were built and owned by the farmers who used them. The knowledge was passed from father to son in the muqanni guilds. It didn't matter who was king or caliph or president. The water kept flowing because the people kept digging. This technology was so effective, it didn't just stay in Persia. It spread to Afghanistan, to Egypt, to Morocco. When the Moors conquered Spain, they brought the qanat with them. And when the Spanish conquered the Americas, they brought it there. In Mexico and the American Southwest, they are called acequias, but the DNA is Persian. This is a global technology. invisible to us only because we are looking for giant stone arches instead of humble holes in the ground. And that brings us to the realization that changes how we see history. We tend to judge the greatness of a civilization by the ruins they leave behind. We look at the Pont du Gard and say, "Look how powerful Rome was." But the qanat teaches us the exact opposite lesson. The greatest engineering isn't what survives as a ruin, it's what never becomes a ruin at all. Roman engineering was an imposition on nature. It was brute force, man conquering the landscape. And like all conquests, it eventually failed. Persian engineering was a collaboration with nature. It used the earth itself as the pipe. It used the natural water table, not diverted rivers. It worked so well that for 3,000 years, nobody needed to invent anything better. The city of Yazd, in the middle of a burning desert, has existed for 3,000 years. It has no river, it has no lake. It exists solely because of the qanat. It is a metropolis built on invisible technology. Today, as we face climate change and water scarcity, we are finally looking back. NASA is now using satellite imaging to map these ancient systems, not just for history, but for survival. In Morocco, they are restoring ancient qanats to fight desertification. In Europe, hydrologists are studying them to understand sustainable water management. This system reminds us that the best engineering doesn't fight nature, it works with it. But the qanat isn't the only ancient solution we've ignored, because it wasn't made of marble. I'm here to help you know the builders of the past. What other primitive technologies do you think were actually superior to ours? Tell me in the comments. See you at the next excavation.